Welcome back, everybody. It's Will Ortner here with In the Trenches, and let's jump right into the NFL's draft round one recap from 2024. Obviously, the first 7 picks, they were pretty chalk. No trades, no one moving around. 3 quarterbacks, 1, 2, 3. Then you've got some wide receivers, offensive linemen getting taken. And then everything gets all jumbled up and all messed up. And the one big move of the draft, it happens in Atlanta, and they take Michael Penix Jr. at number 8. Now, there's a couple reasons why this doesn't make sense, and it's not because they took Michael Penix. I do think that Michael Penix could be a great NFL pro, but here's why it doesn't make sense for Atlanta. Atlanta this offseason went out and signed Kirk Cousins. They signed him to a 4-year, $180 million deal. Now, Kirk is 35. He's going to be 36 by the time the season starts. He's coming off an Achilles tear. So you might say, hey, Will, you got to go and get a replacement possibility or a backup. What if Kirk comes in and he doesn't look like he used to? Yeah, there's a bunch of different targets that he's going to have. You know, he's got the 2 great running backs in Algier and Robinson. He's got London. He's got Pitts. He's got all these weapons. What if he's not good enough to go? You're going to need someone there in the wings to replace him if he's comes back and he's not what he once was, right? Well, here's the problem. Michael Penix is 23. He'll be 24 by the time the season starts. And so if Kirk Cousins doesn't work right away, well, then there was no reason to sign Kirk Cousins. If you had a fear and you came in and you said, I am worried about Kirk Cousins' Achilles tear and how he's going to come back after that, you should have never signed him to the deal in the first place. It just doesn't make sense. It's too much money. It's too many years late in his career, and there's too much guaranteed money, right? That doesn't make sense. So don't sign him. At least don't sign him for that number. If you're thinking, hey, you know what? Kirk Cousins, he's a consummate pro. This is the perfect guy to go and sign. He's going to be our quarterback, and then we'll have a rookie quarterback learn under him for a year or two, and then he'll take over for them. Michael Penix wasn't the dude to do that. Michael Penix is going to be 24 by the time the season starts. If he sits behind Cousins for 2 years, he is 26. He is a 26-year-old before you even get a chance to see what he can do. It really doesn't make sense when you have J.J. McCarthy, who's 2 years younger, right freaking there. The one knock against Nix and against Penix was they are older. So if you draft them, they need to play right now because you need to know if they don't work, because then you only have 2 years of, you know what, they don't work. They can be a backup, or they don't work in our system, or they're just not good at all, because hell, half of the top quarterbacks in the first round are busts anyways. Literally half of them. There were 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round this year. Best case scenario, half of them hit. Half. So if Penix is one of those guys that isn't going to hit, and I'm not saying he will, not saying he won't, you want to know right now, especially since he's already so freaking old. So it just doesn't make sense from a multitude of different reasons. Like, again, if they had decided to go and get J.J. McCarthy and say, we want J.J. to learn under Kirk for a couple of years, and then he kind of fits in the same timeline as these other players, I can get behind that. Go see what Kirk can do. And if Kirk doesn't work out, well, then young guy learns with them. But with what you're doing, it just doesn't make sense. And then to have Kirk Cousins find out right when you're on the clock and you're making the pick, I mean, that's just brutal. It's going to piss off your number one quarterback, the guy who's coming in as your starter. And Penix is saying all the right things right now because he has to. I can't wait to learn underneath him. I can't wait to see what he can teach me. He's a consummate pro. He's a perfect guy for me to learn under. This isn't going to go well for Cousins, because you know Cousins decided to go to Atlanta because he thought that was his last chance at being a champion, at going out and getting a Super Bowl. He thought it was his best spot, and so he decided to go there. The move doesn't make any sense. It's the biggest, boneheadedest, dumbest decision that anyone made so far in this draft. And I really can't figure out what Atlanta's doing. It doesn't make sense. At least last year when they went Bijan Robinson, it's like he is the number one player and it's far and away. So at least that makes sense. Michael Penix was not the number one player left on the board, and he doesn't make sense for a multitude of reasons. Does this mean that he'll come in and be a bust and not work? No, absolutely not. Maybe Kirk Cousins comes in and he's great for 2 years, and then Penix comes in and he's fantastic for 10, because we've seen the longevity of the careers of quarterbacks nowadays. I mean, Kirk Cousins is one of those. I mean, he's 36 and he's still a starting quarterback, and still a very good starting quarterback. So maybe Penix can be that, but it just seems like a really big risk for the reward, which you're really not seeing right now. Like, best case scenario, it's still a weird move. Best case scenario, it's a weird move. And man, that video afterwards where you've got the GM talking with owner Arthur Blank, I mean, ooh, that looked rough. So I already mentioned it before, but some other interesting notes on this recap, right? You had a record-tying 6 quarterbacks selected. This is the first one since the Elway to Marino draft, if you remember that one. This is back in, I believe it was the 80s, but I could be wrong. In the 80s, you got John Elway's drafted. You've got Kelly's drafted in that draft. Dan Marino's drafted in that draft. Obviously, it's a great 30 for 30. Want to check that out, you can go over there. I love where Drake May ended up to New England. I think that's the perfect spot for him. Right now, his issues are immaturity and understanding a pro-style system. He hasn't been asked to work in a pro-style system, so he's not going to know a lot of the pro-style things that he needs to know. He's not going to know how to identify a mic. He might not know how to adjust his protection. He might not know how to adjust a hot route so that he can get his guy into the right spot, into an open spot against a certain defense. He might not even know how to read a certain defense, right? And don't act like this is a Drake May thing. This is something that Patrick Mahomes had issues with too. He can now go to New England, sit behind Jacoby Brissett for a year, develop these weak parts of his game. Brissett, he knows what his career is. His career is not to be a starting quarterback for very long. He is supposed to be a stopgap quarterback. He can help develop him. I love this spot for him to land. I love the Bears draft. This is probably the best situation a number 1 overall quarterback has ever gone into. Caleb Williams goes number 1. Then the Bears draft Rome Odunze at 9. So now you've got Odunze, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Cole Kmet all on the offensive side of the ball for Caleb Williams to throw to. Their offensive line got better as the year went on, but of course, I believe that they're going to go through in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round. They're going to try and strengthen that offensive line for Williams. I love what they're doing. Build around your young quarterback. Try and make his life as easy as possible as you try to finally have a 4,000-yard passer in your franchise. Like, that's insane. One of the oldest franchises in all of the NFL never had a 4,000-yard passer. Caleb Williams can finally be that. And then lastly, I like where JJ and Nick's landed, and I like where they each landed specifically for each other, right? Like, JJ gets to go to a spot where he's got great young wide receivers. You've got Justin Jefferson still over there. You've got Addison over there still. Hawkinson, yeah, he's coming off a torn ACL, but that's another great safety valve. That's perfect for what JJ does. And then he can go in and he can evolve and grow his game. And yeah, he might take some lumps early on. That's a really tough division, but it's a perfect spot for JJ and Minnesota to build, and he kind of fits more on that timeline of those wide receivers. I like where Nick's landed. He fits what Sean Payton wants to do. Get the ball out of your hands quick, short, intermediate passes, be accurate with the football, don't turn the ball over, have an athletic enough quarterback to where he can move around. That's Bo Nix, right? Bo Nix is going to be able to move. He's going to be able to find open wide receivers, and he's going to get the ball out of his hands fast. That's what he did so well in college. That's why he had such a high completion percentage. That's why he's one of the best quarterbacks in college football the last 2 years. Perfect landing spot for Nix. I love those 2 spots for those quarterbacks. I thought it was really interesting that no defensive players were taken until 15. Latu, he's the first guy taken over at Indy. Obviously, he's the best defensive prospect. It seems like that's kind of a foregone conclusion. The issue is he has his injury issues. He had to medically retire at UW. I still like where he's at in Indy. I think he can get after the passer, and that's what you need in today's NFL. So I think that's a great landing spot for him. At 16, Seattle takes the second defensive player. They go get Byron Murphy. He's the number 1 D tackle in this draft. It's not close. And normally you wouldn't draft a D tackle up this high, but what Murphy can do is he can play all three downs. He's great at stopping the run, but he's also great at getting after the passer. A lot of teams compare him to Grady Jarrett / Aaron Donald on like the high end. Obviously, this is like one of those where he has the same build. He's a little bit undersized, but he's big, he's strong, he's jacked, swole. And he uses his speed and leverage that he's already has because he's so short to attack offensive linemen, get underneath them, and get into the backfield. Anytime you can compare a defensive tackle to Aaron Donald and to Grady Jarrett, that's huge. You love that in Seattle, especially in a position where they've had good players. Like Poona Ford was great, Jaron Reed was great, but they weren't to this level. And then what you're seeing also is what it felt like in the past when Seattle has drafted defensive linemen. It's either been that stand-up outside linebacker type player, like a Bruce Irving, where it was solely reliant on speed, or you drafted like an LJ Collier where it was solely reliant on power. And now finally you have this guy who, if you want to go small, you can play him at the nose. If you want to go bigger, you can still play him at the 3. You don't have to take him out for pass rush situations because he can still get there. I think his pass rush rate was about 12%. So that means he's getting to the quarterback at about 12%. Now, that's not necessarily leading to sacks, but that can lead to hurries. That can lead to pressures. That's freaking gigantic from your 3 tech because he's going to be right in the quarterback's face. So the quarterback, when he's taking his reads, no matter which side of the field you're looking to, because if you have a pass rusher that's coming on the left side, quarterback's looking to the right, he's not going to see him. But if he's looking right at the left, he's going to be able to see him. He's going to be able to move. Well, if you have that pass rush right up the middle, your quarterback now can't step up. He has to step out, and that's a perfect spot for your other defensive end types, Mafe, Taylor, Jones, to come off the edge and get some extra sacks and get some extra play. Huge move. I love it. And I also feel like this seems like a statement pick from McDonald. Like he wants to build his defense his way, strong interior, get after the passer, get players that can play a multitude of different positions, but that can do it in the trenches and win those wars. I absolutely love that. And I love that for McDonald. And I love the zig while everyone else is zagging, right? Record 23 offensive players taken in this draft, ton of wide receivers. Last 2 guys drafted off the board were wideouts. I think you're going to see a big run on defensive players, but this shouldn't be shocking to anybody. You know, we talked about it in the preview of the draft where I thought for sure 4 quarterbacks would be taken in the first round. And then I thought that Nix and Penix, depending on what teams thought of them and if teams liked them, I thought there was a chance they could get taken. I would have thought that Denver would have moved back and got Nix later on. And then Penix was just, he was so volatile. Like he was such a wild card because it really depended on, did teams worry about his injury issues? Did they not? Where was he going to land? I didn't really have a good gauge on that. Obviously, they all go in the first round. And then you have this massive offensive line class, specifically offensive tackle class. They all get scooped up. And even the Arizona kid gets drafted when a lot of people were saying that he was probably a day 2 guy. So it's just a big day all around for the offensive side of the football. No running backs taken. That's not a shock. Don't expect to see any of them until end of the second round, but probably not until the 3rd round. So that'll be interesting. Some key players to still keep an eye on for tomorrow. For day 2, you've got Cooper DeJean. That's the cornerback out of Iowa. I wonder if he doesn't break his leg in that freak injury in November, if he is a first round pick. You saw a couple corners get taken early on. And kind of going into the draft, it was thought that maybe he'd be the second cornerback off the board. I wonder if him not being able to test is what kept some teams away from him. Kool-Aid McKinstry, the Alabama cornerback, he's still there. Ladd McConkey, that's the wide receiver, this little slot that Georgia had. I like what you can do with him because he can play a multitude of different positions. Like, yeah, you can use him on the outside, but you can also use him on the inside. It's kind of like a mix of like that Tyler Lockett, Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman, Wes Welker type, where he's big enough and fast enough and his routes are crisp enough to where you can use him on the edge, but he's going to do his most damage in the slot. And with the new spread offenses that teams are using where they want to get that H involved, especially if they don't have a strong tight end in the passing game, I love Lad McConkey. I think he can do a lot of things. Keon Coleman, I watched a bunch of Florida State games early on this year because I might have bet on them a lot early on. He's a big, strong, physical wide receiver. He's going to go up and get the ball. Not many times are there going to be people that outmuscle him to balls. Oh, by the way, he's a freak athlete who's going to jump over people and run past people. So not only is he big and strong, he's fast too. Great wide receiver. He's going to make someone really happy in the second round. And then the last one, I have to give some love to the offensive line, but Jackson Powers Johnson, center out of Oregon. Last year, he was the #1 center in all of college football. The kid is an animal. He set that offensive scheme. He made sure that in an offensive line group where they were constantly rotating, they didn't play just 5 guys. They played about 7 or 8 on that O-line unit. And he made sure that they were all working together. The chemistry was fantastic. They kept Bo upright, and they were up for the Joe Moore Award. Didn't end up winning it, but they were finalists. Kid is an absolute beast. He's a stud, and he's going to make a team very happy when he signs with them. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're going to get more videos out like this. We're hoping to do at least 1, maybe 2 more videos when it comes to the NFL draft. Maybe we'll even get Couch GM on and we'll do a live stream where we're talking to each other about that. But for sure, thank you so much for checking out the channel. Make sure to subscribe, and you all have a wonderful night.
Oh, look at this run. What a run. Marshawn Lynch still on his feet. Has blockers now. He's dancing his way for the touchdown.